You are on the next level. This is The Beautiful Truth, where the expression is still free.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
And you are very welcome. This is The Beautiful Truth on breakfornews.com with Fintan Dunne reporting on the 5th of April at noon Eastern. Folks, it's a heads up for those of you who are concerned about 5G and what it might do to you, and concerned about the issue of cell phones in general. First, a heads up. The 5G stuff you're seeing going around is just clickbait. The people who are putting that out, many of them don't care whether it does or not. They are just generating content that will create clicks, which they can turn into revenue for advertising or whatever. Yeah. So the truth on these issues of 4G and 5G goes right back to the kind of generation of cell phones that you're using right now and to 2002. Let me show you. This is from the Daily Mail and in the UK, and it was 2002 this came out. Radiation from mobiles may lead to brain damage. Scientists discovered that emissions from handsets affect the delicate makeup of cells in blood vessels and could be a health hazard. The radiation might disable a safety barrier in the body which protects the brain from harmful substances in the blood, they believe. Now, you see, normally the focus in media is on cancer and whether these might cause brain cancer. That's not the big risk. This is the big risk. There's no point in assessing the health implications of using phones if you're not looking at the big risk. This is the big risk. Why? We'll go on. It's the first time scientists have used cells from human blood vessels rather than rats, bringing researchers closer to the truth. They've found that mobile radiation triggered potentially harmful changes in human cells. The radiation made the cells in blood vessel walls shrink, allowing potentially harmful substances in the blood to leak into the brain. This is the blood-brain barrier. We've all got one. And there's your brain behind the barrier. And there's the barrier, the fence in front. And there's all the stuff that circulates in your body, in the blood, leaping up and down outside. Now, if we make some holes in that fence, then some of those blood bits might be able to fit through. And that would be a problem for your brain, because your brain is like one of those things you see in the science movies where the computer has to be kept in a perfectly sterile environment. It's the same with your brain. So do you really want something that's going to affect the blood-brain barrier? That's the long-term issue here, not whether you get cancer in the short term or even longer term. It's whether you're going to be susceptible to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in later life and only find that out in later life because of this kind of damage. Now, Lund University, who began that research, and I reported that now going back as far as 2006, cell phones are frying your brain on breakfornews.com, picked up by rents.com in 2005, and a thread on breakfornews.com, spotlight on cell phone dangers. You can still find that thread if you Google it. So this does go back a while. And those Lund University researchers, they did research which showed that there was a 2-week delay, after the effect of the cell phones had taken place, a 2-week delay, and they could still see blood-brain barrier leakage taking place in the rats. Another study in 2015 then by Chinese researchers found that exposure to ordinary cell phone radiation significantly impaired spatial memory and damaged blood-brain barrier permeability. It's not the only research. Showing you now peer-reviewed research. ncbi.nih.gov, cognitive impairment in rats after long-term exposure to GSM 900 mobile phone radiation impaired their memory for objects and their temporal order of presentation compared to controls. Detecting the place was not affected. So they were affected in that they could find the place where stuff was in the puzzles they were having to solve, but they couldn't remember which particular thing was where and what order they were in. This is just from exposure to cell phones now. 2 hours each week over the course of a year. Produce that. Memory deficiency in those rats. Here's another one. This is Salford again. Increased blood-brain barrier permeability. GSM mobile phones, again, show you the results on that. Present findings are increased for earlier studies where we've seen increased blood-brain barrier permeability. Now, there was another report done, blood-brain barrier permeability, Salford et al. Again, 14 and 28 days. Dark neurons found in the rats' brains was enhanced albumin uptake correlated to occurrences of damaged neurons. That's about it. I'm not going to bore you with much more in the way of the science of all this, except to say that then in 2017, they did another deep, intensive test on this thing. They checked it out again, and this time they came up with conclusions that really it's not that big of an effect. They got these mice, they put them in these Perspex tubes, and those slides you see there are where they beamed the radiation down at their heads in order to generate something akin to what you'd experience in real life. And they say, as a result of that, that their outcomes were, no, not significantly. They didn't find deterioration of brain tissue. What are you to make of all that? What are you to make of all that? Well, what you can make of it is this, that quite a number of pieces of research have found that there is indeed damage to be seen, and that other research has found that there isn't. But the question is, are they still looking for the right kind of damage? Because those tests were basically measuring immediate neuronal damage. And that's not the concern here. The concern is that you've got a soup of stuff going around in your body. And if you've got a leaky gut, for example, then you've got a soup of all sorts of toxic stuff that's come from your gut in circulation. And all of that crud has the potential to cause problems in your brain if it gets across that barrier. Now, if you're using cell phones on a protracted basis, that blood-brain barrier is not going to be as intact as it would be were you someone who's not using cell phones. We can forget about distant radiation. I'm not going to address those issues. They're very complex, and we should all do research into that. But the real damage comes from when you have something like I've got here, something held to the side of your head, trying to communicate with a transmitter in that direction and going right through your brain as it transmits. In areas of poor reception, the transmission power coming from this side and beaming through your brain to get to the cell tower can be 10 times higher in a poor reception area than in a good one. The cell phone ups its output in order to do that automatically, and you're unaware of it. So if you're using cell phones a lot and you're holding them to your ear, and even if you're in relatively good reception areas, I'm just showing you where the increased risk is in low reception, then you're going to have blood-brain barrier effects. It's like a magnetic effect. These phones can create electromagnetic effects, and that's going to twist the tennis net in your brain and open up little holes where tennis balls can fit through. And that's the bottom line. So how can you avoid those risks? How can you mitigate against that? Well, you use your cell phone on hands-free. I don't use a cell phone held to my ear. I put it on hands-free. If that means that there's going to be other people in on the conversation, I go somewhere where I can do that in comfort rather than put it to my ear. Another good way is to use a Bluetooth extender. Isn't that just another form of radiation hanging out of the side of your head? No, it's not really, because the cell phone is putting out 30 times at least as much power as the Bluetooth device is. It's an order of magnitude higher, because the cell phone is trying to communicate with a cell tower, which may be 2, 3, 4, 5 miles away, whereas your Bluetooth device is only trying to cover a distance of a few meters. So the Bluetooth is a way for you to insulate yourself from that high-risk thing of placing a transmission device to the side of your head and then communicating using that device. So that's the key defensive mechanism you have. Just go hands-free, and you are mitigating, I would say, at least 80% of the risk. So what about 5G then? Well, you see, the 5G system is going to be an even higher frequency than the current generation of phones. It's actually, ironically, paradoxically, possible that the 5G phones would not have the same effect on the blood-brain barrier, because the blood-brain barrier is a large physical object. And so, like someone who's in a home whose windows are rattling because there's a guy outside in the street with a big speaker and he's playing bass music and it's causing your home to vibrate in sympathy, yeah? In a similar fashion, the higher the frequency, the less your home is going to vibrate. It's bass frequencies that cause things to vibrate. So higher frequencies might not affect the blood-brain barrier as badly. Bad news though, higher frequencies might affect molecular processes. It might twist the shape of some of the molecules that are vital to your brain chemistry. What's the answer then? Well, you've got to do some research. And are they doing it? Well, you've just seen really most of the research in that little bit of, there are literally billions of people using cell phones around the world, and that's the kind of level of research that's out there already over the last 15 years about the potential dangers. Most of the research is concentrating on cancer dangers from overheating, which is definitely a risk if you're a heavy duty occupational phone user, but not if you're a casual user of phones. No, it's more this risk for long-term Alzheimer's that's the risk, and that's not being really evaluated properly. These tests, including the one that claims to give a clean bill of health to phones, that still is not going to test for how that's going to affect mice in old age. That's the kind of test I'd like to see. How did the mice who were young when they used the cell phones and as they grew older using cell phones perform in old age, in senescence? That's the kind of studies that we need. They're not being done. So in the light of that, not only should you be careful about 5G, you should be damn well careful about the 4G instruments you're using at the moment. And there's a mitigation strategy that you can use to get around that. We've covered that now. All right, that's it in a nutshell, really. I do like trying to nutshell it because you're busy. Hey, so that's the beautiful truth on cell phone dangers, 4G and 5G. I'll be back with more soon. I do hope you can join me for that. But in the meantime, this has been Fintan Dunne reporting.